All right, ready to begin? We're in a teaching series about the power of one word. We're focusing on just one word each Sunday morning. And I have been telling you, if you will begin to say this one word consistently and correctly, your life will change for the better. I'm going to begin this morning by reviewing last week's word and the passage that we studied for that word. The reason for doing that is because we're going to look at the very same passage at one point today. We looked at the parable of the prodigal son last week, Luke chapter 15. Our word last week was aha. You missed a week. Last week was aha. All right, aha. We speak about aha moments, those moments of insight and clarity and discovery, a moment of awakening that transforms our life. And we've worked through this acronym for the word aha. I think this is really quite insightful. Aha. A stands for awakening. Our eyes are opened. We see something we haven't seen before. We see something in a completely different light. It's a moment of clarity. And in the parable, the prodigal son, the younger son, who has spent all of his father's money, who ends up feeding pigs and longing to eat pig slop, has this awakening moment. He hits bottom. He comes to his senses, verse 17 said. He came to his senses, and he looks back and he wonders, how did it come to this? How did I end up here? Awakening. This is not what I planned my life to be. H in the acronym stands for honesty, in which we tell ourselves the truth about ourselves. We tell ourselves the truth about ourselves, honest about our present condition in our life and who we have become. The son said to himself, here I am, starving to death, and implied is because of my choices. Doesn't sugarcoat that. He's just brutally honest. I'm starving to death because of my choices. He doesn't blame shift. He doesn't rationalize. He doesn't minimize. He doesn't let himself off the hook. This is that moment of, I'm going to stop living in denial. I'm going to own my stuff. The awakening and honesty go hand in hand, okay? And then the A, the final A in our acronym of AHA, stands for action. A behavioral change that results from the awakening, that honesty where we tell ourselves the truth about ourselves, that leads to action, verse 20. And so as a result of the awakening and the honesty, he got up and went to his father. So I just think that is so good. We have to have an aha moment where all three of those ingredients are present, or our life never really changes. The word for this week also comes from the parable. It's the hardest word in this series. By the way, just one more week. Next week we're going to kind of wrap it up. We're going to celebrate or partake in the Lord's table together. The week after that we'll begin our fall series. And that week we'll begin the Wednesday evening sort of community building study as well. But the word for today is the hardest word in the entire series. We don't like to say this word at all. It's the word sorry. Not like oops, not like oh my bad, but this is like going under the knife and having surgery on your soul. Confessing with humility how you have wronged or offended someone, and you're going to make amends and set things right. I am so sorry. Remember this board game? Yes, sorry. The subtitle, The Game of Sweet Revenge. That is an odd phrase for a game that's called sorry. But at the heart of the game, sorry, is this acknowledgement that saying sorry and being sorry are really very, very different. Because in the game, you want to land on someone so you can say sorry and send them back to the beginning. Yeah, we love that game, sorry. Unlike the game, apologizing and saying that you are sorry really, really can be difficult. Remember Elton John singing the song, "Sorry seems to be the hardest word." Yeah. I'm not going to try to imitate Elton John, can't you? Sorry seems to be the hardest word. So there was a study of couples, of those whose marriages have succeeded and those that didn't make it. The study found that in the marriages that succeeded, couples said sorry twice as often as those that didn't make it. I don't know the source of the study, but I do know that we hear repeatedly in marriage counseling sessions, we just hear it over and over. One partner will say that their other partner, that partner never says that they're sorry. And you go, duh, I wonder why you're here. Huge. And so I was doing some research for this message and just searching online. I do this every week for some sermons. And this week I was searching for sermons on apologizing. Very interesting discovery. There were just scores and scores of sermons on granting forgiveness, virtually nothing on apologizing. And that is just so telling. I found many, many sermons on how to forgive people who have hurt you, how to get past the anger, how to get past the resentment, let go of the bondage that you're experiencing because you've been hurt, you've been wrong, you've been offended, you've been sinned against. Here's how you forgive someone in that situation. But I found virtually nothing on apologizing or making amends for the hurt and the pain, the woundedness that you have caused other people. Again, that is so telling. Shouldn't the ratio be about 50-50? Okay, granting forgiveness to those who have hurt you, apologizing, making amends for those that you have hurt. But it's not anywhere close to being equal. Apparently, there's just this small handful of people who go around hurting the rest of us because none of us need to apologize. That's obviously not the case. Sermon on the Mount. Jesus said something that really applies then in this situation. How can you say to your brother, "Let me take the speck out of your eye," when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? How can you see the need for everyone else to apologize and to make amends to you, but you can't see your need to do that for others? You have wronged, you have hurt, you have sinned against others. You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. I actually learned something new this week about that word hypocrite. Never thought about this. Hypocrite, the prefix, and then the word critic or judge. And in the Hebrew language, or in the Greek language, the language of the New Testament, there's the prefix hypo and the prefix hyper. Both prefixes have carried into our language. The prefix hypo means below normal, under. The prefix hyper, hyperactive, means above, beyond, excessive. And so the hypocrite is someone who is insufficiently critical. They are not thorough in their judgment of themselves. They don't look in the mirror and see what is wrong with themselves. Oh, wow, it's interesting. There are some people who are hypercritical of themselves, generally come from a very abused, shame-based background, and their internal talk is very self-critical. Maybe they even say, sorry for everything. But the case more likely is that we are hypocritical. We really don't take a very good look at yourself. So apply that to our topic, and the hypocrite is one who sees the need for everyone else to apologize, to them, but they don't see their need to do that for others. They don't see that they have wronged, they have hurt, they have sinned against others. Back up just a little bit in the Sermon on the Mount. Here's just another jewel here. Chapter 5. And Jesus says, if you are offering your gift at the altar, if you're offering your gift at the altar, the place of worship, the place where you should be so acutely aware that you have been forgiven so much by this very gracious God. If you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, Jesus is talking about those situations where you have offended, you have wronged, you have sinned against someone, where you should be taking the initiative to set things right by apologizing, making amends. If the Holy Spirit brings to mind that your brother has something against you, verse 24, leave your gift. Just leave it there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to your brother. This is how important it is to God. First go be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. So then in this process of sort of trying to prepare this message and going, kind of feel stuck, I don't know where to go in this. It's like, it finally dawned on me how integral the apology was in the action step of the story of the prodigal son. I mean, Mark. As part of the the apology is absolutely central. Awakening, honesty, action step. I'm going to go to my Father and I'm determined to say this. Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. Goes to his Father, and there is just this incredible, grace-filled, moving moment between the Father and the Son. And the entire outcome of the story hangs upon the Son's willingness to go and apologize. It's just such a beautiful story. So from there, I want to, this morning, be very, very practical, because we all need this. We're going to talk about what makes for a good apology. And I found 7 guidelines in this process of apologizing. It's called the 7 A's of Apology, and it comes from this book, The Peacemaker by Ken Sande. Okay? Very practical. Don't elbow your husband or your wife or tell them to pay attention, because we need this. Here's number 1. A good apology will address everyone involved. As a general rule, you should say, I am sorry to everyone who has been affected by your wrongdoing. Take the initiative in seeking them out to apologize. And all of you in 12-step programs, you've done your homework on this, because step 8 in the 12 steps says, made a list of all the persons we have harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Step 9, make direct amends to such persons whenever possible. See, those steps are so crucial to recovery. They're so crucial to emotional and spiritual, mental health, relationship health. Little cartoon. It's not funny, but it's human nature. Calvin and Hobbes. Calvin says, I feel so bad calling Susie names and hurting her feelings. I'm sorry I did it. Hobbes responds, maybe you should apologize to her. Calvin says, I keep hoping there's a less obvious solution. There is not. That's the solution. Step 1, address everyone involved. And so in step 1, what you need to do, where you need to begin is Psalm 139. And you just make this your prayer. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Point out anything in me that offends you or where I have offended others. Show me where I need to apologize, because I am that hypocrite. that is not thorough in the judgment of myself. So show me where I have harmed or offended or sinned against someone. Step 2, guideline 2. Some of this is very obvious, but in a good apology, avoid words like if, but, and maybe. Making an apology is not the same as making excuses. And in fact, if you find yourself making a lot of excuses for why you behaved in the way that you did, you're trying to defend yourself, it's probably not an apology that you're doing. And this point seems like a no-brainer, but we live in a culture where there are such superficial non-apologies. Politicians? Oh, you ever hear a politician apologize? That is a non-apology. If, but, maybe imply that the person apologizing isn't really willing to acknowledge that he or she did anything wrong. When you say, I'm sorry if I've done anything to upset you, what are you saying? I'm sorry if I've done anything to upset you. I think you're really saying, I don't think I did anything wrong, but since apparently you're such a delicate snowflake, I'll appease you and apologize. I'm sorry if you took something the wrong way. The word but is bad on apologies because it has this almost magical ability to cancel out everything that came before it. We will say in counseling, but is an eraser. I'm sorry, but, whoa, stop. You just tried to erase everything that came before, and you're focusing on what's going to come after the phrase but. I'm sorry, but. You're making an excuse. You're bringing a defense. Number 3, third guideline. Admit specifically. Good apology means naming the action and the attitudes that were wrong and then taking responsibility for them. Ken Sande in his book says, specific admissions help convince others that you are honestly facing up to what you have done, which makes it easier for them to forgive you. You ever received an apology and you know the person does not have a clue how deeply they have wounded you? It's just like adding to the offense. I'm sorry we fought last night. It's not nearly as good an apology as, I am sorry I was so short-tempered and didn't take time to listen to your side carefully. Number 4, good apologies acknowledge the hurt. If you want people to see that you are sincere in your apology, then you demonstrate an awareness of how your actions have hurt them. Instead of saying, I'm sorry I was late, you might say something like, I'm sorry I wasted your time. I'm sure it was frustrating not knowing where I was at. When we offend someone, they're feeling pain and they want some evidence that we know how and how much we have hurt them. In 2 Corinthians chapter 7, Paul talks about, he differentiates between godly sorrow and worldly sorrow. We can think of it as the difference between remorse and regret. Regret, worldly sorrow, is when we feel bad about the negative effects our actions have had on us. I made a mistake, I got caught, and I regret that. Remorse means feeling sorrow for the sorrow we have caused. That's what the word sorry means. I am sorry that I caused that sorrow, that hurt in you. I wish I hadn't done that because I see how much it hurts you, and because you are hurting, I'm hurting too. A good apology acknowledges the hurt that you have caused. Hanging in there, number 5. Accept the consequences. And this is the beautiful part about the prodigal son. Prodigal son actually came from sort of a wealthy family. Silver spoon born in his mouth. He rejects all of that goes to a distant country, lives this wasteful life, has this aha moment. He doesn't expect to come back without consequences. He comes back, and as a result of the consequences of his actions, he says, Father, make me like one of your servants. Okay. And so, a spouse who's been unfaithful should understand that the subsequent lack of trust would be that he should make his cell phone and maybe his emails and his computer password readily available for the spouse to see. That's part of the consequences of the action. When you're struggling with this disease of alcoholism, part of the consequences is, you give an account of where you are and what you're doing and how you're spending your money. Accept the consequences. Number 6, alter your behavior. Again, this seems obvious, but alter your behavior. This is the concept of repentance. Repentance means I'm going to turn away from. I'm going to do this 180-degree turn. And in some situations, it's not going to feel like an apology until you've given some evidence that I'm going to change my behavior. Nobody wants to forgive somebody when they feel the pattern is just going to be repeated. All I'm doing now is enabling the same behavior, and I'm being the schmuck. No, to truly be sorry, express your plan to change your behavior. And finally, number 7, allow for time. Now, in Sandy's book, the 7th A is stated like this: ask for forgiveness and allow for time. Ask for forgiveness and allow for time. And I'll tell you, I just disagree with that, the first part of that. I do not ever recommend that you say, will you forgive me? I know that's what we're taught. I know that's how we're conditioned. Will you forgive me? Gary Chapman, in his book, The 5 Languages of Apology, he teaches that we should ask someone for forgiveness. Again, I disagree. I believe it's unwise to do that. I don't have a Bible verse for that. This is just the therapist in me speaking. To say to someone that you have hurt, will you forgive me? I think ignores or minimizes the hurt, hate, heal cycle of forgiveness. That's Louis Schmid. I know I've covered that several times with you before, but in that process of forgiveness, the offended party needs to hurt and wrestle with the hurt and hate what has been done to them so that they form boundaries to say, I'm not going to be treated that way. And then there is this healing process that takes place. Let the offended party work through that process and allow them to extend forgiveness when they are ready. To ask someone to forgive you puts the person apologizing in a moral superior position if the offended party is not ready or doesn't agree to forgive them. The offender now gets to say, well, I asked for forgiveness, they won't forgive me. So shame on them. It minimizes the damage and the hurt that was caused to rush the forgiveness process. And forgiving others is a process. A good apology recognizes that reconciliation and forgiveness is not in the hands of the offender, but in the hands of the person who has been sinned against. Give them time to process. Again, classic example. A person has been unfaithful to their marriage partner, and just because the guilty party has asked for forgiveness, that does not obligate the offended party to forgive. It wouldn't be right to pressure them, to somehow shame them into feeling guilty so that they forgive, because forgiveness has not taken place. If they're going to find forgiveness difficult to do. All you can do as the one who has offended someone is to cover all the aspects of the apology. address everyone involved. Don't use the words like if, maybe, and but. You admit specifically what you've done. You acknowledge the hurt that was caused. You accept the consequences. Make this commitment: I'm going to alter my behavior. The strength of God, I'm going to change my way. And then you allow time for the offended party to grant forgiveness so that reconciliation can really take place. As far as it is possible, as it depends upon you, Romans says, live at peace with everyone. Reconciliation is in the hands of the person that's been offended. Okay? Tough stuff. Anybody have questions on that? Sean?
I just want to say, you really addressed what I went through with Dale. I mean, it's so true that him saying, I'm sorry, you forgive me, when you hurt me over and over, did make me feel guilty like a bad person for not wanting to forgive him. So I think it's so true to address that.
Thank you for your honesty, Sean. A lot of pain behind that. But it's absolutely right.
Yeah.
But it's also spoken as the person who was sinned against. See the different perspective? When you're sinned against or when you are the sinner, the offender. Kathy?
In order to do those steps, you have to say, first, help me, Jesus.
Right on. That was the second sermon. Help. You cannot. No was the first one. Yes. No is actually part of this, isn't it? In terms of, I'm going to set good boundaries. In terms of, whatever. Very good, John. You can't do this on your own. You really can't. All right. Jennifer, come on up and lead us in just a little reflective song, and then I'll pray with you and for you. Really want God to work in your life so that this is something you can take with you in terms of making amends. You know what? I would be very honest.
I have to ask this in the middle of it. What was the first one for the first day?
You are admitting or addressing everyone involved.
Okay, thank you.
I can tell you in the history of this church, every church, there have been so many times where this person will leave and that person will leave because they didn't do the work of just apology and reconciliation. This is, everybody deals with this. So lead us in this song, and we're going to ask God to just